He wanted friends with benefits after dumping me. I went no contact. Then his brother showed up. My phone buzzed non-stop while I was halfway up a white oak, safety harness clipped, chainsaw idling in my hand. The client's text came through first, with a screenshot attached and 3 words in all caps. "Is this you?" I didn't panic. I got very, very still. I stepped off the branch, unclipped, and pulled up Instagram on my phone with dirty gloves still on. Declan's new post was live, a glossy montage of my crew, my equipment yard, and a location tag that practically drew a map to my client's front door. The caption read like a victory lap. "New chapter, new freedom, no drama." Someone in the comments joked about us, asking if I was still in the picture. Declan's reply made my stomach flip and my jaw clench. We're keeping it flexible. I looked at the work happening around me, real people doing real dangerous work with real consequences, and I realized the most dangerous thing on this job site wasn't the splintered oak or the live power lines. It was the man who thought my life was content, my boundaries were suggestions, and my silence meant permission. I didn't text him back. I didn't call. I didn't post a vague story or send a paragraph explaining why he was wrong. I printed the screenshot, put it in a folder, and labeled it Day 1, because I already knew this wasn't going to be the last time I'd need proof. My name is Maren Holt. I'm 31 years old, and my job is keeping trees from crushing houses and people from getting crushed under falling limbs during storm season. On paper, I'm a certified arborist and the owner of a small tree care business in Asheville, North Carolina. In reality, I'm the woman who shows up when your oak splits in half during a hurricane, when your power lines are tangled in branches, and when your insurance adjuster needs proof the damage wasn't negligence. It's not glamorous work, but it's steady, it's real, and it's completely mine. On a good year, I clear about $78,000 after expenses. Some of that comes from emergency storm calls, some from contracted municipal work, and the rest from private jobs like pruning, removals, and land clearing for new construction. I own the equipment outright: 2 trucks, 3 chainsaws, a wood chipper, climbing gear, and a stump grinder that cost more than most people's cars. I lease a small yard on the edge of town where I store everything, and I rent a 1-bedroom apartment above a bike shop that smells like chain grease and coffee every morning. It's not a corner office, but it's exactly what I wanted. Financial freedom doesn't always look like marble countertops and luxury sedans. Sometimes it looks like a truck that always starts, gear you maintain yourself, a client list that trusts you to show up, and the ability to say no without worrying about paying rent. I built this business from scratch after my father died and left me with debt, unfinished promises, and a beat-up Chevy that became the foundation of everything I own now. I learned early that people respect competence more than charm, and I learned later that some people only respect what they can use. I met Declan Voss 2 years ago at a community fundraiser for urban tree planting. He was there filming content for his Instagram page, something vague about intentional living and reclaiming masculinity through discipline. He had the kind of smile that worked on camera, the kind of stubble that looked effortless but definitely wasn't, and sneakers so clean I wondered if he'd ever walked on actual dirt. He approached me while I was talking to a city planner about replanting schedules for storm-damaged neighborhoods. "You're the real deal," he said, like it was a compliment and a surprise at the same time. "Mind if I film a quick clip? Just you talking about what you do. People love this stuff." I should have said no. I didn't. He framed it like exposure, like helping the cause, like collaboration between 2 people who valued real work. And maybe part of me liked being seen by someone who thought my competence was worth capturing on camera. So I said yes. He posted the video that night with a caption about authentic women doing authentic work. It got decent traction, a few thousand views, some nice comments. He tagged me. New clients called. It felt like a win. But looking back, that was the moment I became a set piece in someone else's story. That was the moment Declan realized I wasn't just a woman he was interested in. I was an aesthetic, a vibe, a backdrop that made his brand look grounded and real. Declan and I started dating a few weeks later. It was easy at first, or at least it felt that way. He was charming, attentive, and he said all the right things about independence and partnership and respecting what I'd built. He loved that I owned my own business. He loved that I didn't need him financially. He loved the aesthetic of dating someone who worked with her hands and had dirt under her nails and could operate a chainsaw without flinching. What he actually loved, I learned later, was how it looked. On his page, I was proof that he valued real women and authentic work. Off camera, he treated my job like a backdrop and my boundaries like suggestions he could negotiate around. The first time he filmed one of my job sites without asking, I let it slide. He said it was spontaneous, that he didn't think it would be a big deal, that it was just a quick story to show what I do. The second time, I told him directly, with no room for interpretation. Do not tag locations. Do not show client properties. Do not make my work your content without permission. He laughed, actually laughed, and said I was being paranoid. Relax, babe. It's exposure. You should be thanking me. I didn't relax. I started checking his posts obsessively, scrolling through stories and tagged locations, screenshotting anything that showed my equipment or my clients' homes. Half the time, he ignored what I said. The other half, he'd apologize just enough to make me feel like I was overreacting, like I was being controlling or insecure or ungrateful for the attention his page brought my business. Money became another friction point that slowly eroded my patience and my trust. Declan didn't have a traditional job with a salary or benefits or any kind of stability. He made income through brand partnerships, affiliate links, and the occasional sponsorship deal with outdoor gear companies and lifestyle brands. Some months were good. Most months were tight. He never said he was struggling, but I noticed. Dinner dates where he'd forget his wallet and I'd cover the bill. Gear he'd borrow for shoots and never return. Suggestions that we use my truck for his content because it fit the vibe better than his leased sedan that he could barely afford. I didn't mind helping someone I cared about. I minded being used. And I really minded being treated like I was petty or cheap for noticing the pattern, for pointing out that respect includes returning what you borrow and paying for your own meals. One night, about 6 months into the relationship, we went to dinner at a trendy rooftop bar downtown. Declan had been weird all week, distant and distracted, posting cryptic captions about growth and shedding old skin and becoming the man he was meant to be. I assumed he was stressed about a sponsorship deal falling through or worried about his engagement numbers dropping. I was wrong. We ordered drinks. He waited until the appetizers came. Then he looked at me with that practiced, camera-ready expression he used when he was about to say something he'd rehearsed. I think we need to redefine this, he said. I blinked. Redefine what? He leaned back in his chair, casual, like he was pitching a collaboration to a brand. Us. I love what we have, but I need space to focus on my brand. Labels feel restrictive right now. But we have chemistry, right? So, friends with benefits. I stared at him. The noise of the bar, laughter and clinking glasses and some acoustic cover band playing in the corner faded into static. He wasn't asking. He was announcing. He'd already made the decision, framed it as modern and evolved and emotionally intelligent, and now he was waiting for me to agree like it was reasonable, like I was an amenity he could downgrade and keep on a flexible schedule. I set down my fork. My voice came out calm, which surprised me. You're not asking for friendship. You're asking for access without accountability. He frowned, confused. What? I stood up and pulled cash from my wallet, enough to cover my half of the bill and a tip. You want the perks of devotion without the cost of respect. That's not friendship. That's convenience. I left the money on the table, walked out, and blocked his number at the crosswalk outside. The next morning, I changed the lock code on my equipment yard gate. I updated my business social media accounts to private and scrubbed any posts where Declan appeared or was tagged. I sent a message to my regular clients with a new policy, effective immediately: no filming allowed on job sites without written consent and a signed release. My office manager, Tessa, didn't ask why when I told her what happened. She just helped me audit every tagged post, every location, every time Declan had turned my work into his content without permission. We saved everything: screenshots with timestamps, dates and captions, GPS tags showing client addresses. I didn't know what I'd need it for yet. I just knew I wasn't going to be caught unprepared if Declan decided to rewrite the story or play the victim online. Declan tried to poke holes in the silence over the next few days. Texts from burner numbers asking if we could talk like adults. Emails with subject lines like, "I think there's been a misunderstanding," and "Can we please just have a conversation?" A message through a mutual friend asking if I was okay, if I needed space, if I was going through something. I didn't respond to any of it. No contact doesn't mean slamming doors and screaming and making a scene. It means the door is closed, locked, and you're not entitled to know what's happening on the other side. Tessa asked me once if I wanted to write him a final message, something to make it clear that I was done and why. I said no. No contact is the message. 3 days after I went silent, there was a knock on my office trailer door. I opened it, expecting a client or a delivery. Instead, I found a man I'd never met standing there holding a cardboard box. He was tall, solid, dressed in work clothes that actually looked worked in, jeans with paint stains and boots with scuff marks. He had the same jawline as Declan, but none of the performance, none of the polished edges or camera-ready charm. "Marin Holt?" he asked. I nodded, wary, my hand still on the door. "I'm Rowan Voss, Declan's brother. I'm here to return his things, and I need to tell you something that affects your business." I didn't invite him in right away. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, and waited. Rowan didn't push. He set the box down on the steps, took a half step back, and kept his hands visible, like he understood I had no reason to trust anyone with that last name. "I'm a building inspector for the county," he said. "I don't get involved in family drama. But this isn't just drama. Declan's been posting videos from job sites with tagged locations, client properties, and equipment that implies partnerships and insurance coverage he doesn't have. If someone gets hurt, or if a client sues for privacy violation, you could be liable. I thought you should know." He didn't ask for a response. He didn't linger or try to start a conversation or apologize on his brother's behalf. He gave me his work card, said I could call if I had questions about liability or permitting, and left. I brought the box inside. Tessa and I went through it together. A hoodie, a charging cable, a water bottle, some protein bars. Nothing important. But Rowan's warning stuck in my head like a splinter I couldn't ignore. That night, I pulled up every single one of Declan's posts from the last 2 years. I cross-referenced them with my job calendar, my client contracts, and my liability agreements. What I found made my blood run cold and my hands shake. Declan had used my business name in a pitch deck to an outdoor gear sponsor. He'd implied we were partners, that we co-ran the company, that his content was part of our brand strategy. He'd posted footage from private properties where clients had explicitly forbidden filming in signed contracts. He'd tagged locations that put people's addresses in public view, including one family with young kids whose bedroom window was visible in the background of a video he'd captioned, "Real life, real work." I didn't sleep that night. I built a timeline with Tessa's help. I compiled screenshots, contracts, voice memos, and email threads where I'd explicitly told Declan not to film. I labeled everything by date and potential legal impact. We didn't do it for revenge. We did it because if Declan's recklessness came back on me, if a client sued or a sponsor claimed fraud, I needed proof that I'd explicitly forbidden it. But the more I uncovered, the angrier I got. Not loud anger, cold anger, the kind that doesn't yell, the kind that documents. 2 weeks later, I applied for a city-backed grant to launch a community program I've been dreaming about for years. Free urban tree safety workshops and volunteer replanting drives in underserved neighborhoods that couldn't afford private arborists. It was something I'd wanted to do for a long time, but never had the capacity to organize while running the business full-time. Now I had the time, the focus, and a point to prove. The application required a public hearing where residents and stakeholders could ask questions and voice concerns. I submitted everything on time, filled out every form perfectly, attached references and proof of certification. I didn't think about Declan. I didn't think he'd care about a community program that had nothing to do with him. I was wrong. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday evening in a bland community meeting hall with folding chairs and fluorescent lights and a panel of bored city officials shuffling papers. I arrived early with Tessa. We sat in the second row. Rowan Voss was there too, sitting near the back in a county jacket. He'd told me a week earlier that he wanted to observe, that it was part of his job to understand community development projects that might need permits or inspections later. I appreciated the heads up. I didn't expect him to matter. Then Declan walked in. He was late, loud, and filming himself outside on his phone, talking to the camera about standing up for truth and calling out people who use you and then try to erase you. He walked into the meeting room like he owned it, holding his phone up, panning across the sparse crowd. One of the officials told him to put it away. He didn't. He smiled at the camera and said, "Transparency, right?" The hearing started. I gave my presentation calmly and professionally. Program goals, safety curriculum, partnership with local nonprofits, projected budget. It was straightforward, well-researched, and backed by data. The panel asked a few clarifying questions about liability and volunteer training requirements. I answered them clearly. Then Declan raised his hand. The moderator sighed, but nodded. Declan stood up. He didn't put his phone down. I just want to say, for the record, that this whole thing is personal. Marin and I had a relationship. It ended badly. Now she's using my family connections and my ideas to build her brand and shut me out. This program? I pitched this exact concept to her months ago. She's retaliating because I left. The room went still. I didn't react. Tessa's hand tightened on the chair armrest, but she stayed quiet. Rowan, in the back, looked at his brother with something close to disgust. I waited. The moderator asked if I wanted to respond. I said yes. I stood up, pulled a labeled folder from my bag, and walked it to the front table. I'd like to submit documentation for the public record. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't perform. I opened the folder and explained calmly what was inside. A timeline showing that I'd forbidden filming on job sites multiple times, with dated text messages as proof. Screenshots of Declan's sponsorship pitch deck, which used my business name and client sites without permission or legal partnership. A signed contract from a client explicitly stating no photography or video allowed, next to a screenshot of Declan's post showing that exact property with a location tag. An email from a sponsor representative confirming that Declan had misrepresented our relationship and falsely claimed proof of insurance tied to my company. Then I played a 15-second audio clip. It was from a conversation Declan and I had 6 months earlier, recorded on my phone during what I thought was a normal planning talk about a weekend shoot. His voice was clear and unmistakable. "I'll tag the yard as ours. Brands eat up that blue-collar couple aesthetic. They won't check the paperwork." I looked at the panel. I never agreed to be a brand asset. I explicitly refused. He did it anyway. One of the clients I'd worked for stood up from the audience. She was shaking, her voice tight with anger and fear. "My kid's bedroom window was in one of his videos. Do you understand what that means? Their school, their schedule, our address, all public because he wanted content." Her voice cracked. I trusted Marin. I didn't know someone was turning my home into a set. Declan's face went red. He started to argue, but the moderator cut him off sharply. "Sir, if you continue filming, you'll be removed from this meeting." Declan lowered his phone but kept talking, his voice rising. "This is taken out of context. She's obsessed. She can't let go. She's using my brother to get back at me." Rowan stood up. He didn't yell. He just said, clearly and calmly, "I'm here as a county inspector observing a public hearing. Marin didn't ask me to come, and everything she just submitted is accurate. The sponsor representative, who'd been sitting quietly near the front, raised her hand. For the record, we terminated our agreement with Mr. Voss last week after discovering the misrepresentation of partnerships and insurance coverage. We were prepared to pursue legal action for fraud. Declan's mouth opened and closed. He looked around the room. Nobody was on his side. The officials shuffled papers, visibly uncomfortable. The moderator cleared her throat. "Mr. Voss, you're welcome to stay, but you need to stop filming and stop interrupting. Ms. Holt, thank you for the documentation. We'll take it under advisement." Declan stood there for another few seconds, phone in hand, visibly panicking. Then he turned and walked out. The door slammed behind him. The room exhaled. The hearing continued. My application was approved pending a final budget review. I sat down. Tessa squeezed my hand. Rowan caught my eye from the back and gave a small, respectful nod. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. But I also felt clean. The fallout happened fast. Declan's Instagram spiraled. He posted vague accusations about cancel culture and betrayal and people who can't handle success. But the comments turned skeptical. People asked questions. They demanded proof. Sponsors pulled away. His follower count started dropping. He tried to pivot, rebranding himself as a victim of a smear campaign orchestrated by a bitter ex. But the documentation was public record now. Anyone who wanted to verify the truth could. And they did. A week later, Declan showed up at my equipment yard, uninvited. I was in the office trailer finishing invoices when I heard the gate rattle. I looked out the window and saw him trying to climb over the fence. I didn't hesitate. I called the police. Officer Daniela Ruiz arrived within 10 minutes. She was calm, professional, and completely uninterested in Declan's explanations or excuses. "Do you have permission to be here?" she asked. Declan gestured vaguely toward me. "It's basically my place, too. I helped her build this. I brought clients. I interrupted. "No, he doesn't have permission. He never did." Officer Ruiz wrote up a trespass warning on the spot. She told Declan that if he returned, he'd be arrested. He tried to argue. She didn't engage. She just repeated the warning and waited until he left. After she drove away, I stood in the yard for a while, listening to the sound of nothing. No buzzing phone, no unexpected visitors, no violation of the boundaries I'd set. Just the hum of the chipper in the distance and the rustle of wind through the trees. It felt like the first full breath I'd taken in months. Rowan checked in a few days later. Not a text, a polite email asking if I was okay and if I needed anything related to the permit process for the community program. No pressure, no performance. Just a straightforward offer of help from one professional to another. I appreciated it. I wrote back and said I was fine, but thank you. He replied with a single line. "If you ever want to grab coffee and talk shop, zoning, safety codes, boring stuff, let me know. Public place, daytime, no expectations." I smiled. 3 days later, I said yes. We met at a cafe downtown. Rowan showed up exactly on time, ordered his own coffee, and didn't try to pay for mine. We talked about building codes, storm damage liability, and the logistical nightmare of running community programs through city bureaucracy. It was the least romantic conversation I'd ever had. It was also the most respectful. He didn't ask about Declan. He didn't flirt. He treated me like a colleague, like someone whose work and time mattered. When we left, he said, "This was good. Let's do it again if you want." I did. Over the next few months, my program launched successfully. The workshops filled up fast. Volunteers showed up. Families came out to learn how to identify hazardous trees and when to call professionals instead of trying dangerous work themselves. Local news covered it. The city started talking about expanding funding for Phase 2. It was everything I'd hoped for, built on work that was mine and partnerships that were real. Rowan helped with the logistics in a grounded, unobtrusive way. Permitting, site inspections, insurance clarifications. Not because he wanted credit or content, but because he was good at it and it needed doing. We started spending more time together, slowly, carefully. He never rushed, he never assumed. One night, after a long replanting event, we sat on the tailgate of my truck, covered in dirt, drinking terrible gas station coffee. Rowan looked at me and said, I'm not here to replace anyone. I'm here because I respect you. I looked at him. Then respect that I move slow. He nodded. I can do slow. 6 months later, Declan tried one more move. He posted a heavily edited video implying that I'd stolen his ideas and destroyed his career out of spite and vindictiveness. He tagged local news outlets and tried to drum up outrage and sympathy. It didn't work. The documentation was still public. The clients who'd spoken up still had their stories. The sponsors still had their records. Within hours, the post was flooded with comments calling him out. He deleted it. Then he deleted his entire account. I didn't celebrate. I just noted it and moved on. A year after that hearing, Rowan and I stood in the middle of the new community green space we'd helped design together. A public lot that had been vacant and trash-filled, now transformed into a teaching forest with marked trails, identification plaques, and volunteer-maintained native plantings. The city had just approved Phase 2 funding. Rowan turned to me, hands in his pockets, and said, "I know we've been taking it slow, but I want you to know I'm all in. Not for the look of it, not for content, just because I want to build a life with you." I looked at him. Then build it with me, not on me. He smiled. Deal. We got engaged 3 months later. No cameras, no performance, just us, in the woods, where everything real happens. The wedding was small. Family, close friends, and a few of my crew members who'd been there through the mess. Declan wasn't invited. He tried to show up anyway, standing outside the venue with his phone, muttering something about public property and his right to document. Rowan's father, a retired cop, walked out and told him to leave. He did. That was the last time I saw him. Now I run a business that's grown by 40% since I stopped letting someone else narrate my life. I teach workshops that actually matter to people who actually need them. I work with a partner who shows up, shuts up when I'm working, and treats my competence like a fact, not an aesthetic. Declan's online presence is a graveyard of deleted posts and rebranded attempts that never stick. I don't check anymore. I don't need to. People ask me sometimes if I ever regret how it all went down, if I wish I'd handled it quietly, privately, without documentation or public hearings or lawyers and police reports. I tell them the truth. Quiet only works if the other person respects boundaries. Declan didn't. So I built a paper trail, protected my work, and let the truth do the talking. I didn't destroy him. He destroyed himself the moment he mistook my silence for permission. If you've ever been downgraded, dismissed, or treated like a convenience by someone who claimed to care, hear this. No contact isn't cruel, it's structural. It's the boundary that protects you when words won't. And sometimes the loudest thing you can do is refuse to explain yourself to people who never earned the right to your story. So let me ask you, what's your definition of no contact? Is it blocking and silence? Or does it include documentation, boundaries, and protecting your name when someone tries to rewrite your life? Drop your thoughts below. And if you want more stories where receipts beat performance and boundaries win wars, hit subscribe, because I've got plenty more where that came from. He tried to keep me as an option. I became unavailable, and that's when my life finally belonged to me.